Clara Brennan's fingers moved with practiced precision as she tallied the last column of figures in her father's ledger. Outside the window, Nevada's unforgiving sun baked the drought-parched ranch where she'd spent all her 22 years. When young Jimmy Barnes appeared at the door, hat in hand, Clara didn't hesitate. "Take the last sack of flour," she said, though their own stores were dwindling. "Your ma and the little ones need it more than we do." As Jimmy scurried away, Clara caught sight of dust rising on the horizon. Banker Hargrove and his men, no doubt, coming to collect on her father's debts. Her hands trembled slightly, but she squared her shoulders and closed the ledger. What would become of a woman with nothing but her good name in a territory where even that could be stripped away with a banker's pen and an auctioneer's gavel? Dawn breaks over the Brennan ranch as Clara moves quietly through the small cabin. She lights the stove, puts coffee on to boil, then carefully measures out her father's medicine. Thomas Brennan's consumption has worsened, his once powerful frame now wasted and frail as he sleeps fitfully in the back room. Clara checks the medicine bottles, noting which are running dangerously low. She'll need to visit Dr. Hayes in town, though she's uncertain how she'll pay him. Father's gambling debts have mounted, and there's precious little left to sell. Pouring a cup of coffee for herself, Clara steps onto the porch where Mrs. Wilson, their elderly neighbor, waits with fresh eggs. The old woman's arthritis prevents her from managing her own chickens, so Clara tends them daily, splitting the eggs between them. "You're up with the roosters again, child," Mrs. Wilson says, accepting the cup Clara offers. "That father of yours any better?" "Some days are kinder than others," Clara replies, the practiced answer hiding her deeper worries. As they share this small moment of community, Clara notices a rider observing the ranch from a distant ridge. Even at this distance, she recognizes Hargrove's distinctive silhouette. His presence sends a chill through her despite the morning warmth. Mrs. Wilson follows her gaze. "That man's been sniffing around like a coyote at a hen house," she mutters. "You be careful, girl." Clara nods, her jaw set. Whatever comes, she'll face it with the dignity her mother taught her before dying years ago. Some things can't be taken, no matter what papers a man might hold. The weekly market in Silver Creek buzzes with activity as Clara navigates between stalls with her small basket. Though her purchases are meager, she exchanges warm greetings with everyone she passes. Old Sheriff Taylor tips his hat respectfully. The Cooper children run up for the peppermint sticks. She always brings them. At the apothecary, Dr. Hayes accepts Clara's carefully counted coins for her father's medicine, waving away the full amount. "Your daddy was there when my Emma had the fever," he says quietly. "I don't forget such things." Clara's reputation for honesty and hard work has earned her the town's respect, despite her father's known weaknesses for cards and whiskey. As she passes the livery stable, young Billy Watson rushes out. "Miss Clara, Pa says to tell you we've got your wagon wheel fixed. No charge on account of you keeping books for him last winter when his eyes were bad." Before Clara can respond, the atmosphere shifts perceptibly. Conversation falters as banker Hargrove emerges from his office across the street, accompanied by two men Clara doesn't recognize. Their city clothes and calculating eyes mark them as out-of-towners. Martha from the general store leans close as Clara passes. "Those men been asking questions about your daddy's property lines," she whispers. "Hargrove's been showing them maps." Clara thanks her with a nod, maintaining her composure while unease builds within her. Her father's land sits atop what some believe might be silver deposits, worth little as a struggling ranch, but potentially valuable to speculators. As Clara turns to leave, she finds Hargrove blocking her path, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Miss Brennan," he says, loud enough for others to hear. "I'll be riding out to discuss some urgent business with your father tomorrow. Matters that can't wait any longer, I'm afraid." His gaze slides over her in a way that makes Clara's skin crawl. The meaning is clear. Her father's debts have come due, and Hargrove intends to collect one way or another. "We'll be expecting you, Mr. Hargrove," she answers steadily, though her heart hammers in her chest. As she walks away, she feels the town's eyes on her back, some pitying, some concerned, all knowing that the storm long brewing for the Brennans is about to break. Clara finds her father awake when she returns, sitting up against his pillows with the familiar deck of cards spread across the quilt. The sight brings a mixture of love and frustration. The hands that taught her to ride and shoot, now too weak for anything but shuffling pasteboard that brought their ruin. "You've had visitors while I was gone," she says, setting down her basket. A half-empty whiskey bottle tells her who, Joey Parker from the saloon, bringing liquor and probably taking what little cash her father had left. Thomas Brennan looks away, shame briefly crossing his gaunt features. "Just passing time, Clara girl." She busies herself putting away her purchases, fighting back useless anger. "Hargrove's coming tomorrow," she says finally, "with men interested in the land." Her father's face darkens. "Vultures circling already, and me not even cold." "There must be something we can do," Clara insists, sitting beside him. "Some way to pay what's owed, keep the ranch." Thomas takes her hand, his own fever-hot and trembling. "Clara, there's something I need to tell you, something I've done." The confession comes haltingly, not just gambling debts and mortgages, but a signed agreement using the ranch as collateral for a final, desperate game, one her father had been convinced would solve everything. Instead, he'd lost catastrophically to Hargrove himself. "The papers say," he struggles, coughing, "they say everything goes to him when I pass. Everything, Clara." The implication hangs in the air between them. Not just the land and cabin, but all possessions. In territorial law, with no male heir, that could legally include her labor, her future. A knock at the door interrupts them. It's Jamie Rodriguez, their closest neighbor and longtime friend. "Hargrove's man just delivered this," he says grimly, handing Clara an official-looking document. "I thought you should know they're talking in town about an auction. After your father—" Clara scans the paper, her world collapsing around her. The auction notice lists everything: livestock, furnishings, equipment, and at the bottom, a final entry. "Female, age 22, to settle remaining debts as per agreement." Jamie clasps her shoulder. "This ain't right, Clara. I'd help if I could, but after the drought—" She nods, knowing his family is struggling too. As he leaves, Clara stands frozen, the paper trembling in her hands. Her father's sobbing apologies fade into background noise as she confronts the unthinkable future racing toward her. 3 weeks later, Clara stands behind the auction platform, the late summer sun beating down mercilessly. Her father's funeral was yesterday, a small, quiet affair. Hargrove hadn't even waited for the dirt to settle before posting the auction notices across the county. From her position, Clara can see the crowd gathering in front of the platform, miners, ranchers, townspeople, and strangers drawn by the spectacle. Her father's possessions are arranged in sad little groupings: tools, furniture, the few head of cattle that survived the drought. Hargrove approaches, his satisfaction barely concealed. "A shame about your father, Miss Brennan, but debts must be settled. as I'm sure you understand. Clara meets his gaze steadily. I understand many things, Mr. Hargrove, including what kind of man preys on weakness. His smile falters. Careful, girl. Your situation is precarious enough. He gestures to a rough-looking man nearby. Jessup here will be overseeing your presentation. I suggest cooperation. As he walks away, Clara notices Dr. Hayes moving through the crowd, his face grim. Their eyes meet briefly, a silent acknowledgment of the injustice unfolding. The auction begins with the livestock. Clara watches as the life her father built is dismantled piece by piece, each item going for a fraction of its worth. When they reach the ranch deed, Hargrove himself makes the winning bid, far below market value, as he'd ensured no competing buyers were present. Then Jessup grabs Clara's arm, pulling her toward the platform steps. "Time for the final lot," he says, his breath hot against her ear. Clara struggles briefly, but freezes when he produces a knife. "Your dress," he orders. Hargrove says the merchandise needs to be visible to fetch a proper price. Horrified understanding dawns. This final humiliation was planned, to strip her not just of possessions, but dignity itself. "That won't be necessary," comes a firm voice. Dr. Hayes stands at the bottom of the steps, medical bag in hand. "The girl is ill. I've been treating her for weeks. Contagious, potentially. Wouldn't want an epidemic on your hands, Hargrove." Jessup hesitates, looking to Hargrove for direction. The banker's face darkens with anger, but he's careful of his public image. "Fine. Keep the dress, but get her up there now." As Clara is led to the auction block, she catches Dr. Hayes's eye. His small act of defiance won't save her, but the knowledge that someone still sees her as human rather than property gives her strength to face what comes next. Clara stands on the auction block, her eyes fixed on the distant mountains. She refuses to look at the faces below, some leering, some uncomfortable, some simply curious. The auctioneer, a man who'd once tipped his hat to her in town, now describes her as if she were livestock. Healthy female, age 22, educated, can read and write, experienced with ranching, cooking, and accounts. Bidding starts at $50 to settle remaining debts. The silence that follows is somehow worse than jeers would have been. Clara feels the weight of it pressing down, the ultimate degradation, to be offered for sale and found wanting. From the corner of her eye, she sees Mrs. Wilson sobbing quietly, supported by her son. The old woman had brought Clara's few personal belongings to the auction site that morning, including her mother's locket. Now the only possession Clara has left in the world. No takers at 50? The auctioneer sounds surprised. 40 then? Surely she's worth 40. Someone in the crowd coughs uncomfortably. Most won't meet her eyes. Even those who might help are constrained by their own precarious finances or fear of crossing Hargrove. Clara's mind races to what comes next. If no one bids, Hargrove will claim her as payment. His intention all along, she now realizes. His ranch needs a housekeeper, and his previous 3 young servants had all fled within months, telling stories Clara had dismissed as gossip. The reality of her situation crashes over her. No home, no family, no protection from whatever Hargrove plans. For the first time, her composure cracks. A single tear traces down her cheek, though she remains otherwise still. From the back of the crowd, a voice suddenly calls out, $100. The crowd parts, turning toward the speaker. Clara allows herself to look, seeing a tall, broad-shouldered man she doesn't recognize. His clothes mark him as a rancher, though not from nearby. Hargrove's face contorts with anger. 200, he counters immediately. The stranger's expression remains impassive. 300. As the bidding escalates between the two men, Clara realizes she's simply being transferred from one owner to another. Yet something about the stranger's steady gaze holds neither lust nor cruelty, just quiet determination. The bidding continues, climbing to unprecedented amounts for a debt settlement auction. Hargrove's face grows increasingly flushed as he's forced to commit more than he'd planned. The stranger, Ezra McKinnon, someone whispers, counters each bid calmly. Finally, Hargrove hesitates at $1,000. The auctioneer looks nervously between them. 1,000 going once. She's damaged goods, Hargrove suddenly announces to the crowd. Been keeping her father's books. Wouldn't surprise me if she's as crooked as he was. Probably can't even birth healthy children. The cruel slander hangs in the air. Clara's hands clench at her sides, but she remains silent, knowing any defense would only amuse Hargrove more. 1,500, McKinnon says, his voice carrying clearly. Hargrove's eyes narrow. You're a fool, stranger, but she's yours. He turns away, gesturing sharply to Jessup to follow. The auctioneer hammers the gavel. Sold to Mr. McKinnon. Clara is led down from the platform, her legs unsteady. She stands before her new owner, eyes downcast, waiting for instructions. Instead, he drapes his coat around her shoulders. Miss Brennan, he says quietly, I'd like to speak with you privately, if I may. Before she can respond, Jessup reappears with Hargrove. One last matter, Hargrove says, producing a document. The transfer papers require her signature, acknowledging the settlement of her father's debts through this arrangement. McKinnon takes the paper, scanning it quickly. This makes her my indentured servant for 7 years. That wasn't part of the auction terms. Standard procedure, Hargrove insists. Unless you'd prefer to rethink your purchase? Clara watches the exchange, understanding dawning. If she signs, she'll be legally bound to McKinnon for 7 years. If she refuses, Hargrove will find another way to claim her. I'll sign, she says suddenly, her voice stronger than she feels. But I want it noted that I do so under protest and coercion. Hargrove laughs. Note whatever you like, girl. The result's the same. As Clara takes the pen, McKinnon's hand briefly covers hers. Trust me, he whispers. With no other options, Clara signs her freedom away, her future now tied to a stranger whose intentions remain unknown. As Hargrove walks away, victorious despite losing the auction, Clara feels utterly adrift, her entire world reduced to the mercy of the man standing beside her. The journey from the auction site stretches in silence. Clara sits rigid on the wagon seat beside McKinnon, his coat still around her shoulders. They've traveled miles, leaving behind familiar territory, each hoofbeat carrying her further from everything she's ever known. When McKinnon finally speaks, his voice is unexpectedly gentle. There's food in the satchel behind you, if you're hungry. Clara doesn't move. Where are you taking me, Mr. McKinnon? My ranch, about 3 hours' ride from here. He glances at her. You have questions. I understand that. Why? The word contains all her confusion, fear, and desperate need to understand. McKinnon keeps his eyes on the trail. What happened back there wasn't right. No person should be sold like property. So you bought me out of charity? The bitterness in her voice surprises even Clara. I bought your freedom, Miss Brennan. There's a difference. Clara laughs, a hollow sound. My freedom cost you $1,500, An expensive moral stand. Some things are worth the price. They fall silent again. Clara studies him surreptitiously. His weathered face suggests years of outdoor work, but his eyes lack the hardness she's come to expect from men in the territory. Still, experience has taught her that kindness often comes with hidden costs. As dusk approaches, they stop to water the horses. Clara walks a short distance away, needing a moment alone. Leaning against a boulder, she finally allows herself to weep for her father, her lost home, her uncertain future, the crushing weight of dependency on a stranger's goodwill. Through her tears, she notices a young woman hurrying along the road, clearly distressed. When their eyes meet, the woman hesitates, then approaches cautiously. "Are you all right, miss?" she asks Clara, despite her own obvious troubles. Clara wipes her tears, struck by the irony. "Just difficult times." The woman nods knowingly, offering Clara a clean handkerchief. "My husband left me in the last town. I'm trying to reach my sister in Carson City." Despite her own circumstances, Clara reaches into her pocket, retrieving her mother's locket, her final possession. "Take this," she says. "It should buy you passage the rest of the way." After a moment's hesitation, the woman accepts it with tearful thanks before continuing her journey. McKinnon, who has witnessed the exchange from a distance, says nothing when Clara returns to the wagon. But something has shifted in her, a reminder that even at her lowest point, she still has the power to help another. Perhaps that's a kind of freedom Hargrove couldn't auction away. They reach McKinnon's ranch well after nightfall. Exhausted and numb, Clara barely registers the modest but well-maintained house and outbuildings as McKinnon helps her down from the wagon. "You'll stay here tonight," he says, leading her to a small cabin near the main house. "It was built for a foreman, but I haven't hired one yet." The cabin is simple but clean, with a bed, table, and cook stove. McKinnon lights the lamps, then sets down a bundle he's carried from the wagon. "Some necessities," he explains. "Mrs. Alvarez from the neighboring ranch provided women's things. She'll visit tomorrow." Clara stares at the bundle, then at McKinnon, struggling to understand his intentions. "What do you expect of me? What services am I to provide for my purchase price?" McKinnon's expression darkens. "None, Miss Brennan. Those papers you signed, I'm burning them tonight." "Then why?" He sits at the table, gesturing for her to do the same. When she remains standing, he continues anyway. 3 years ago, my sister found herself in circumstances similar to yours. No one helped her." His voice grows quiet. "She didn't survive what happened next." Clara's defenses falter at the pain evident in his face. "I couldn't save her," he continues, "but when I saw you on that auction block, I knew I couldn't ride away, not again." "So I'm your redemption?" Clara asks, less bitter now, genuinely trying to understand. "No, Miss Brennan, you're not here to ease my conscience. You're here because you deserve the chance my sister never got." He stands, moving toward the door. "The cabin is yours for as long as you need it. Tomorrow we can discuss arrangements. Work, if you want it, passage elsewhere, if you prefer. But tonight, you should rest knowing you're safe and free to make your own choices." As he reaches the door, Clara finds her voice. "Mr. McKinnon?" He turns. "Thank you." The words feel inadequate but necessary. He nods once, then leaves her alone. Clara explores the bundle, finding clothing, toiletries, and even a small pouch containing coins, enough for stage passage to Sacramento or Denver. The realization that he's provided means for her to leave immediately if she chooses brings fresh tears to her eyes. On the table sits a covered plate she hadn't noticed. Beneath it, she finds fresh bread, cheese, and preserves. Such simple comforts, yet in this moment they represent something profound, the recognition of her humanity when the world had reduced her to property. For the first time since her father's death, Clara allows herself to believe she might have a future beyond survival. Clara wakes to sunlight streaming through the cabin windows. For a disorienting moment, she expects to see her childhood room before yesterday's events crash back into her consciousness. She dresses in the simplest of the provided clothes, a serviceable blue dress similar to ones she'd worn at home. The familiar routine of washing and dressing steadies her as she considers her situation. McKinnon had promised freedom, but experience had taught Clara that words and intentions often crumbled against harsh realities. Still, the money pouch remained on the table where she'd left it, enough for her to leave if she chose. Outside, she finds McKinnon repairing a corral fence. He acknowledges her with a nod, but doesn't approach, giving her space to explore the ranch on her own terms. Clara walks the property, assessing it with a rancher's daughter's eye. The operation is modest, but well managed. About 40 head of cattle, several horses, a small vegetable garden. One man handling it alone would struggle, explaining his mention of a foreman. By the shed, she discovers books carefully stored in crates, history, philosophy, even poetry, not what she expected from a frontier rancher. Next to them, a small portrait of a young woman whose resemblance to McKinnon confirms she must be the sister he mentioned. Returning to her cabin, Clara finds herself remembering her mother's words from childhood. Your worth isn't tied to what you have or what others think of you. It's in what you choose to do with each day you're given. In the years since her mother's death, Clara had defined herself through duty to her father and their struggling ranch. Now, with both gone, she faces the question of who she is without those responsibilities. At the cabin table, she writes 2 lists, one of her skills, bookkeeping, animal husbandry, cooking, basic medicine, and another of her options, leaving for a city, seeking domestic work elsewhere, staying temporarily at McKinnon's ranch. Looking at the lists, Clara realizes something that stops her hand mid-word. For the first time in years, she has choices, limited and shaped by circumstance, yes, but still hers to make. When McKinnon appears at midday, Clara meets him at the door rather than waiting inside. "I'd like to stay," she says directly. "Not as charity, but as your ranch bookkeeper and housekeeper. Fair wages for fair work until I decide my next step." McKinnon studies her for a moment, then nods. "Terms acceptable, Miss Brennan. When would you like to start?" "I already have," she replies, handing him the inventory and accounting observations she'd made that morning. For the first time since the auction, Clara feels the weight on her shoulders lighten slightly. She's no longer simply surviving. She's beginning to rebuild. 3 months pass at the McKinnon ranch. Winter approaches, bringing crisp mornings and early sunsets. Clara has settled into a routine, managing the ranch accounts, cooking meals, and gradually expanding her responsibilities to include helping with the livestock when needed. The cabin has become her own space, personalized with wildflowers in simple jars and a small collection of books borrowed from McKinnon's extensive library. Their working relationship has evolved into a respectful friendship, with evening meals often extending into discussions of books or territorial politics. McKinnon, Ezra, as he's asked her to call him, treats her with unfailing courtesy, never overstepping boundaries. His initial formality has softened into genuine regard for her intelligence and competence. Today, Clara works in the main house, reviewing supply orders for winter. Through the window, she watches Ezra instructing Miguel, a young local man recently hired to help with the cattle. Ezra's patient teaching reminds Clara of her father in better days, before gambling consumed him. Mrs. Alvarez arrives with her weekly delivery of eggs and butter, bringing news from town. "You've become quite the topic of conversation, querida," she says, settling at the kitchen table. "A woman running a bachelor's ranch. Some approve, others—" She shrugs expressively. Clara smiles, used to Mrs. Alvarez's friendly gossip. "I'm employed here, nothing more." The older woman's eyes twinkle. "For now, perhaps. But I see how he looks at you when you don't notice." Heat rises to Clara's cheeks. "It's not like that." "Maybe not yet," Mrs. Alvarez says gently. "But healing takes time, for both of you." After she leaves, Clara finds herself considering the possibility. In Ezra, she's found someone who values her mind as well as her capabilities, a partnership of equals rather than the ownership Hargrove had intended. That evening, as they share a simple supper, Ezra mentions plans to expand the herd in spring. "I'd appreciate your input on the finances," he says. "You have a good head for such things." "I'd be happy to help," Clara replies, realizing she's begun thinking of the ranch as partly hers, a future she might belong in rather than a temporary refuge. The feeling of cautious hope is so unfamiliar it takes her a moment to recognize it for what it is. The knock comes at dawn, sharp, authoritative raps that startle Clara from sleep. Pulling on a shawl over her nightdress, she peers through the cabin window to see two men on horseback in front of the main house. Their formal attire and stern bearing suggest official business. As she watches, Ezra emerges, buckling his gun belt. The conversation appears tense, with Ezra gesturing emphatically while the visitors remain impassive. When one produces papers, Ezra's shoulders visibly stiffen. Clara dresses quickly and hurries across the yard. As she approaches, she catches fragments of conversation. Warrant for her arrest, embezzlement charges, harboring a fugitive. Ezra spots her, and his expression transforms to one of concern. Clara, go back to the cabin. Too late. The taller visitor turns, revealing a marshal's badge. Clara Brennan. She nods, confusion giving way to cold dread. "You're wanted in Sacramento for embezzlement from the Whitman Banking Company 2 years ago. We have a warrant for your arrest." Ezra steps between them. "There must be some mistake. Miss Brennan has been in Nevada territory for years." "No mistake," says the second man, unfolding a wanted poster bearing Clara's likeness. "Charles Whitman himself signed the complaint." She worked as his personal secretary before disappearing with $5,000. Clara feels the ground tilt beneath her. "That's not true," she manages. "I never stole anything." The marshal looks unmoved. "Save it for the judge, ma'am." Ezra's expression has changed, uncertainty replacing protective concern. "Clara?" The betrayal cuts deeper than she expected. After everything, one accusation is enough to plant doubt. "I worked for Charles Whitman briefly," she acknowledges, straightening her spine. "I left because of his inappropriate advances. I never stole from him or anyone else." "Yet you never mentioned this employment when I asked about your past," Ezra says quietly, "because it ended badly, and I was ashamed." Clara meets his eyes directly. "I came to Nevada to start fresh, help my father. I thought that part of my life was behind me." The marshal interrupts. "Touching story. Now, you're coming with us." "She's not going anywhere without proper procedure," Ezra insists. "I want to see this warrant authenticated by our local sheriff." The second man steps forward menacingly. "We don't need local permission to enforce federal warrants, rancher." As tension builds, Clara makes a swift decision. "I'll go willingly," she announces. "I have nothing to hide, and I won't bring trouble to this ranch." The look Ezra gives her is unreadable, concern and doubt warring behind his eyes. In that moment of hesitation, Clara feels something fragile shatter between them. The trust, so carefully built over 3 months, crumbles under the weight of her undisclosed past. The marshals allow Clara to collect her few belongings while they saddle their horses. Ezra follows her to the cabin, closing the door behind them. "Why didn't you tell me?" His voice is controlled, but hurt edges each word. Clara folds a shawl with trembling hands. "At first, I didn't trust you. Later, I was afraid. Afraid this would happen, that you'd look at me exactly as you are now. I deserved the truth." "Yes," she admits, "you did. But the truth isn't what they're claiming." She tells him everything, how she'd worked for Charles Whitman, son of the banking family, how his advances became increasingly aggressive, how she'd refused him and been fired immediately. The missing money had been discovered after her departure, and Whitman had named her as the thief. "I fled to Nevada, where my father was ranching. I thought the distance would protect me. Then he died, and Hargrove—" Her voice breaks. Ezra's expression softens slightly. "Why would Whitman pursue you after 2 years?" "I don't know," Clara whispers. "I thought he'd forgotten me." A sharp rap at the door signals their time is up. Clara gathers her courage and lifts her small bag. "I need to face this, Ezra." "Running only makes me look guilty." He reaches for her, then stops, uncertainty still evident. "I'll send word to Sheriff Taylor, have him look into these marshals. Something doesn't feel right." It's not the unconditional support she'd hoped for, but more than she expected after seeing doubt cloud his eyes. Outside, the marshals bind her wrists before helping her on to their spare horse. The rope cuts into her skin, far tighter than necessary for a cooperative prisoner. "We'll make camp at Miller's Creek tonight," the taller one informs Ezra. "Continue to Sacramento tomorrow." As they ride away, Clara doesn't look back. The humiliation of the auction block had been terrible, but this, being taken as a thief from the place and people she'd begun to think of as home, cuts deeper. The mountain trail grows steeper, and Clara notices they're not heading toward Miller's Creek at all, but deeper into remote country where few travel. Cold fear replaces her earlier resignation as she realizes these men may not be legitimate marshals at all. Alone with 2 unknown men, bound and headed away from civilization, Clara faces a darkness deeper than any she's known before. Night falls in the mountain camp. Clara sits with her back against a pine tree, hands still bound, though her feet are now tied as well. The men who claim to be marshals have shed their official pretense, drinking whiskey and speaking freely about their plans. Hargrove said to make it look like she ran, the taller one. Maddox says. Accident in the mountains, body never found. Seems like a lot of trouble for one woman. His partner Jennings replies. Ain't about her. It's about the silver under McKinnon's property. Hargrove needs her gone, so McKinnon has no reason to fight the claim. Their casual discussion of her murder chills Clara more than the mountain air. They believe Ezra won't contest Hargrove's land grab without her presence, suggesting he cares for her more than he admitted, or more than he knows himself. Clara tests her bonds surreptitiously, but they hold fast. She has no weapon, no horse, and no clear idea of their location. Even if she could escape, the wilderness itself might kill her before she found help. For the first time, Clara allows herself to truly feel the despair she's been holding at bay. Her father's death, the auction, and now this betrayal by Hargrove. It seems the world is determined to take everything from her, even her life. A memory surfaces, her mother's voice from childhood. When everything seems darkest, look for the pinprick of light. It's always there, even when you can't see it yet. Clara raises her eyes to the star-filled sky. What pinprick of light could possibly exist now? As if in answer, a distant sound reaches her, the soft whinny of a horse that isn't one of their mounts. Someone else is out there in the darkness. Friend or foe, it represents change in a hopeless situation. Clara closes her eyes, gathering her remaining strength. When opportunity comes, if it comes, she must be ready. The camp grows quiet as Maddox and Jennings finally succumb to whiskey and exhaustion. Clara remains alert, straining to hear any sound from the surrounding forest. The strange horse had gone silent, leaving her uncertain if she'd imagined it. A shadow detaches from the deeper darkness between trees. Clara tenses, preparing to cry out if the men stir, but the approaching figure moves with deliberate stealth. Moonlight reveals Ezra's face as he kneels beside her. His finger presses against his lips, warning for silence. With swift, efficient movements, he cuts her bonds. "Can you walk?" he whispers, barely audible. Clara nods, struggling to her feet as blood rushes painfully back into her limbs. Ezra supports her with a steady arm, guiding her slowly away from the camp. Each step requires intense concentration to avoid snapping twigs or rustling leaves that might wake their captors. Once they've put sufficient distance between themselves and the camp, Ezra leads her to where Dr. Hayes waits with 3 horses. The doctor's presence surprises Clara almost as much as Ezra's rescue. "Can you ride?" Dr. Hayes asks quietly, already examining her chafed wrists. "Yes," Clara whispers, though her body aches from the rough journey and bindings. While the doctor applies salve to her wounds, Ezra explains in hushed tones. "Something felt wrong about those marshals. No proper identification, taking you into the mountains instead of toward Sacramento. I rode to town immediately after you left, found Dr. Hayes." "The doctor has connections with law enforcement?" Clara asks. Hayes gives a wry smile. "My brother is an actual federal marshal in California." "These men aren't on any official roster." "Hargrove sent them," Clara says. "I heard them talking. They were planning to kill me and make it look like I'd escaped. It's about silver rights on your land, Ezra." Ezra's expression hardens. That explains Hargrove's sudden interest in boundary disputes. He hesitates, then adds, "Clara, I owe you an apology. I should have trusted you completely." "You came after me," she responds simply. "That's what matters." Dr. Hayes interrupts gently. "This reunion is touching, but those men will wake eventually. We need to move." "Where can we go?" Clara asks. "If Hargrove's behind this, he'll send others." "My ranch for tonight," Ezra says. Then Dr. Hayes has a plan. As they mount up, Clara notices both men are armed, Ezra with his usual revolver, Hayes with a shotgun. They're risking their lives for her, a woman with nothing to her name but accusations. "Why are you helping me?" she asks Dr. Hayes as they begin their careful descent. The doctor studies her thoughtfully. 20 years ago, I couldn't save a young woman in circumstances similar to yours. I've regretted it every day since." He glances at Ezra. "Besides, anyone who matters can see your worth plain as day." For the first time since the false marshals arrived, Clara feels the faintest stirring of hope. Not just for survival, but for vindication, and perhaps something more, given the way Ezra keeps looking back to ensure she's managing the difficult trail. Sometimes, she realizes, Help comes not from grand gestures, but from quiet courage, the kind that drives a man to track kidnappers through mountain wilderness or a doctor to risk his reputation for justice. Dawn breaks over Ezra's ranch as the three riders approach cautiously. They circle wide, checking for unwelcome visitors before entering through the back pasture. Miguel, clearly relieved at their return, takes the horses while they hurry inside. In the kitchen, Ezra builds a fire while Dr. Hayes prepares coffee. Clara sinks gratefully into a chair, exhaustion finally catching up with her now that immediate danger has passed. "We can't stay long," Ezra says, placing a cup before her. "Hargrove will realize his men failed when they don't return." "I've been thinking about your situation," Dr. Hayes says. "The embezzlement charge is suspicious. Why pursue you after 2 years? And why send hired guns instead of legitimate marshals?" Clara shakes her head. "I've wondered the same. Charles Whitman accused me after I rejected his advances. But $5,000 is an enormous amount. Surely the bank would have noticed immediately, not years later. Unless," Ezra suggests slowly, "the money wasn't actually missing until recently." Dr. Hayes nods thoughtfully. "And they needed a scapegoat." "Or a distraction," Clara adds, pieces falling into place. "What if Charles himself took the money, then blamed me to cover his tracks? With me gone, no one would question it." "That fits with what we know of Hargrove's involvement," Ezra agrees. "He's been trying to acquire my land for months. When I wouldn't sell, he found another way: eliminate the person keeping my books in order, create chaos, then press his advantage." Dr. Hayes sets his cup down decisively. "We need proof of Whitman's embezzlement and Hargrove's conspiracy. I can telegraph my brother in Sacramento to investigate the bank records." "And I'll visit Sheriff Taylor," Ezra adds. "Those false marshals committed kidnapping, a federal offense." Clara watches them plan, amazed at their determination. "What can I do?" "Stay alive," Dr. Hayes says bluntly. "You're the key witness to everything." "You'll stay at my sister's widow's home in Carson City," Ezra explains. "Martha's a formidable woman who keeps a shotgun by her door. No one will look for you there." Clara straightens, finding new resolve. "No. I won't hide while you two risk everything. This started with me, and I should face it directly." After a moment's hesitation, Ezra nods. "Then we'll face it together. But we do it smart, with a plan." As morning light strengthens, the three allies develop their strategy, not just for Clara's survival, but for exposing the corruption that had nearly destroyed her life twice now. For the first time, she isn't simply reacting to disaster, but actively fighting for justice. 2 weeks later, Silver Creek's town hall fills with curious citizens. Sheriff Taylor called the meeting after Dr. Hayes received a troubling telegram from Sacramento. The community buzzes with speculation as people take seats on hard wooden benches. Clara sits between Ezra and Dr. Hayes near the front, conscious of the whispers and stares. Some faces show sympathy, others suspicion. Mrs. Wilson hobbles over to clasp Clara's hand briefly before finding her seat. Sheriff Taylor calls for order. "Folks, we've got serious matters to discuss. Some concerning activities have come to light regarding certain business practices in our community." From the side of the room, Hargrove interrupts. "If this is about those ridiculous accusations from McKinnon and his housekeeper, I'll remind everyone that she's a wanted criminal." "That's precisely what we're here to address," the sheriff continues calmly. "Dr. Hayes has received communication from Federal Marshal James Hayes in Sacramento regarding Clara Brennan's case." Dr. Hayes stands, reading from an official telegram. Investigation confirms no embezzlement occurred at Whitman Banking Company during Clara Brennan's employment. Recent audit reveals misappropriation of funds by Charles Whitman himself, dating to 8 months ago. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Hargrove's face reddens. Preposterous. You expect us to believe? Furthermore, Doctor. Hayes continues. 2 men claiming to be federal marshals who attempted to apprehend Miss Brennan have been identified as known criminals with connections to land speculation schemes across 3 territories. Sheriff Taylor takes over. I've verified that no legitimate arrest warrant exists for Clara Brennan. Instead, evidence suggests a conspiracy to frame her as part of a larger scheme involving mineral rights. The community's reaction transforms as understanding dawns. Mrs. Wilson stands shakily. I always knew that girl was honest as the day is long. Shame on those who thought otherwise. Others voice their agreement, many expressing outrage at how Clara had been treated. The tide of public opinion shifts visibly, leaving Hargrove increasingly isolated. Martha from the general store speaks up. We've all heard rumors about Hargrove's business methods. Maybe it's time we looked closer at other deals he's arranged. As more community members find their courage to speak against Hargrove's practices, Clara watches in amazement. The very community that had stood silent during her auction now rallies in her defense. The power of truth, once revealed, spreads like wildfire through the assembled townsfolk. As the meeting continues, the door swings open. A distinguished older woman enters, accompanied by a young man who bears a striking resemblance to her. The room falls silent at their unexpected appearance. Sheriff Taylor steps forward. Can I help you, ma'am? I am Eleanor Whitman, she announces, her cultured voice carrying authority. This is my son, Charles. Clara's breath catches. Charles Whitman looks considerably less confident than he had in Sacramento, his eyes darting nervously around the room. Eleanor continues, addressing the crowd. I've come regarding the matter of Clara Brennan and certain accusations made against her. Hargrove hurries forward. Mrs. Whitman, I assure you we're handling the situation. Be silent, she cuts him off sharply. I'm not here to speak with you. She walks directly to Clara, who rises to face her former employer's mother. Miss Brennan, Eleanor says, my son has something to say to you. Charles steps forward reluctantly, unable to meet Clara's gaze. I falsely accused you of embezzlement, he admits, voice barely audible. The money was never missing until I took it myself, months after you left. Gasps and exclamations fill the room. Eleanor Whitman silences them with a raised hand. When my husband discovered the discrepancies in our accounts, Charles blamed you rather than admit his own wrongdoing. I believed him until last week, when our head bookkeeper found evidence of Charles's recent transactions. Her stern gaze finds Hargrove. Including payments to certain individuals in Nevada Territory. Hargrove's composure cracks. This is absurd. You have no proof of any arrangement between us. Actually, Sheriff Taylor interjects, we do. He produces letters found in the possession of the false marshals, detailing payments and instructions bearing Hargrove's signature. The banker's face pales as he realizes the extent of evidence against him. In desperation, he draws a concealed derringer from his coat. This is all her fault, he snarls, aiming at Clara. Everything was arranged until she turned McKinnon against me. Ezra moves instantly, placing himself between Clara and the weapon. Lower the gun, Hargrove. It's over. Step aside, McKinnon, Hargrove demands, his hand shaking. This doesn't concern you. It has since the day I saw her on that auction block, Ezra replies steadily. a day you orchestrated after driving her father to ruin. The standoff stretches, tension building as the community watches in horror. Clara steps out from behind Ezra, facing Hargrove directly. "You can shoot me," she says calmly, "but it won't change the truth. These people know what you've done, not just to me, but to many of them through your schemes and manipulations." Hargrove's resolve wavers as he sees the unified front of townsfolk surrounding Clara. The derringer trembles in his grip. In a swift motion, Sheriff Taylor disarms him from behind. "Nathan Hargrove, you're under arrest for conspiracy, attempted murder, and fraud." As Hargrove is restrained, Eleanor Whitman approaches Clara again. "Miss Brennan, on behalf of Whitman Banking, I offer our sincerest apologies." She presents an official document. This is a formal retraction of all accusations and a complete pardon for any alleged wrongdoing. Charles Whitman adds haltingly, "I'm truly sorry, Miss Brennan. My actions were unforgivable." Clara accepts the pardon with steady hands. "Not unforgivable, Mr. Whitman, just requiring accountability." As Sheriff Taylor leads Hargrove away, the tension in the room dissolves into relief and celebration. Justice, so long denied, has finally arrived through the courage of individuals standing together against corruption. The town hall gradually empties as people return to their daily lives, though many pause to offer Clara kind words or apologies for not speaking up sooner. She accepts each graciously, understanding that fear had kept many silent. Eleanor Whitman approaches Clara, Ezra, and Dr. Hayes as they prepare to leave. "There's one more matter to address," she says, producing another document. "Compensation for the damages you've suffered." The amount listed causes Clara's eyes to widen. "Mrs. Whitman, this is far too generous." "It's merely just," Eleanor responds firmly. "No amount can truly compensate for what you've endured, but it will provide you independence to build whatever future you choose." After the Whitmans depart, Clara sits quietly in the now empty hall, the pardon and compensation papers in her lap. The victory feels hollow compared to the losses that preceded it: her father, their ranch, years of her life spent under false accusation. Ezra settles beside her. "You won," he says gently. "Did I?" Clara looks up. "My father is still gone, our land sold, and the community that watched me auctioned like cattle now acts as if nothing happened." "Not nothing," Dr. Hayes counters, joining them. "People learn slowly, but they do learn. What happened today changed this town. And some wounds heal with time," Ezra adds. "Not perfectly, but enough to build something new." Clara nods, acknowledging the truth in their words. Justice has been served, but the journey has changed her irrevocably. She is not the same woman who stood on that auction block months ago, stronger in some ways, more cautious in others. "What will you do now?" Dr. Hayes asks. "With your name cleared and finances secured, you could go anywhere." Clara looks at Ezra, a question in her eyes that she's not yet ready to voice aloud. His gentle smile suggests he might already know her answer. "First," she says, "I need time to decide who Clara Brennan is now that she's truly free." Spring transforms the Nevada landscape as wildflowers carpet meadows that were barren just weeks before. 6 months have passed since Hargrove's arrest and Clara's vindication. The McKinnon Ranch has flourished under joint management, with Clara using part of her compensation to invest in improvements. Today, Clara walks the property's eastern boundary, noting where new fencing will be needed for the expanded herd. Her clipboard contains meticulous notes on expenses and projected returns. the bookkeeper's habits never quite abandoned despite her changed circumstances. She pauses at the small cabin where she first stayed, now renovated into a schoolhouse for the children of nearby ranches. Inside, Miguel's wife, Teresa, teaches reading and arithmetic 3 days each week, Clara's initiative to bring education to isolated families. Clara's own living arrangements changed gradually, first to the guest room in the main house as winter deepened, then to a more permanent arrangement that the community pretends not to notice while smiling knowingly whenever she and Ezra visit town together. At the garden she established behind the house, Clara kneels to check early plantings. The soil that once seemed as barren as her future now promises abundance. She's learned that some things require patience, vegetables, healing, and the careful rebuilding of trust. Mrs. Alvarez arrives with her weekly deliveries, finding Clara among the seedlings. "Always working," the older woman chides affectionately. "Even with money enough to hire others." Clara smiles. "The work keeps me grounded, reminds me what's real." Mrs. Alvarez studies her thoughtfully. "You've changed this place, querida. Not just the ranch, but Ezra, too." He smiles now. "We've changed each other," Clara acknowledges. Their conversation turns to practical matters. Supplies needed from town, news of neighboring ranches, plans for the upcoming harvest festival, normal concerns of daily life that once seemed impossibly distant when Clara stood on the auction block. As Mrs. Alvarez prepares to leave, she hesitates. "That young woman you helped last month, the one running from her husband?" Clara nods, remembering the frightened girl who'd appeared at their door with bruises she couldn't hide. "She's settled nicely at my cousin's place in Carson City. Found work in the millinery shop." Mrs. Alvarez squeezes Clara's hand. "Your kindness made the difference." Clara watches her drive away, reflecting on how suffering had expanded rather than diminished her capacity for compassion. The girl wasn't the first person she'd helped since her own ordeal, nor would she be the last. Some patterns, once broken, create space for new ones to form, stronger, more beautiful, and infinitely more resilient. The Silver Creek Church overflows with people gathered for the spring social. Tables laden with food line the yard while children play games organized by the new schoolteacher. Clara moves through the crowd with quiet confidence, greeting neighbors who once averted their eyes at her auction. Dr. Hayes joins her, offering lemonade. "Quite a different reception than you once received," he observes. "People change when given the chance," Clara replies. "Most of them, anyway." Their conversation turns to Hargrove, now serving his sentence in the territorial prison, and Charles Whitman, working under his mother's strict supervision to make amends for his actions. Even those who caused such harm had potential for redemption, another lesson Clara has embraced. Sheriff Taylor approaches with news that the territorial government has instituted new regulations preventing human auctions for debt settlement. "Your case was cited specifically in the legislation," he tells Clara. "Some good came from your suffering." The knowledge brings complex emotions, satisfaction that others might be spared what she endured, yet awareness that no law can erase what happened to her. Clara has learned to carry both the injury and the healing simultaneously, neither diminishing the other. Later, as afternoon shadows lengthen, Reverend Morrison gathers everyone for the dedication of the community's new lending library, funded jointly by Eleanor Whitman and Clara's Foundation for Education. This library stands as testimony to the power of truth and reconciliation, the Reverend announces. Where once stood division, we now build bridges of understanding. Clara hadn't planned to speak, but Ezra encourages her forward. Standing before those who witnessed her lowest moment, she finds her voice. Books opened worlds to me when my own world narrowed to survival, she says simply. If this library helps even one person find their way through darkness, it fulfills its purpose. After the dedication, Mrs. Wilson hobbles over, leaning heavily on her cane. "I was remembering your mother today," she says unexpectedly. "Catherine would be mighty proud of the woman you've become." The mention of her mother brings tears Clara doesn't try to hide. "I hope so. She had your same spirit," Mrs. Wilson continues. "Always said you can judge a person not by how they handle good fortune, but by how they weather storms." As the elderly woman moves away, Ezra slips his hand into Clara's. "She's right, you know, though I'd add that real strength shows in how we help others after our own storms pass." Clara squeezes his hand in silent agreement, watching the community that once failed her now coming together in ways that might prevent such failures in the future. This, too, is part of healing, not just personal recovery, but the mending of the social fabric itself. Autumn paints the Nevada landscape in gold and crimson as Clara stands on the porch of what is now officially the McKinnon Brennan Ranch. Her marriage to Ezra 3 months ago surprised no one, though Clara had insisted on maintaining her family name alongside his, a small but significant reclaiming of identity. She watches a wagon approach, carrying young Sarah Jenkins and her brother Thomas, orphaned by a mining accident last month. The children will stay with them while arrangements are made with distant relatives, or perhaps longer if the growing affection between them and the McKinnons continues to flourish. "They're here!" Clara calls over her shoulder to Ezra, who emerges from the house carrying a small wooden horse he's carved for Thomas. Together, they welcome the children, who dismount with increasing confidence. Sarah, at 12, shows Clara's ledgers where she's been practicing her arithmetic. Thomas, only 8, proudly demonstrates how he can now saddle his pony without help. These small victories, a girl finding joy in numbers, a boy gaining independence, represent Clara's most meaningful legacy, not the foundation she established with her compensation money, nor the changes to territorial law her case inspired, but the direct impact on individual lives. As Ezra leads the children to see new kittens in the barn, Dr. Hayes arrives for his monthly visit. He finds Clara on the porch, contentment evident in her face. "The children are settling well?" he asks, joining her. "They're resilient," she replies, "more than they know." They discuss his latest letter from Sacramento, where his brother continues working to reform debt laws across Western territories. Clara's story has traveled far, inspiring changes she never imagined when fighting for her own survival. "You've built something remarkable here," Dr. Hayes observes, gesturing to the thriving ranch and the children's laughter drifting from the barn. "Not alone," Clara corrects gently. "None of us heal alone." As evening approaches, the expanded family gathers at the kitchen table. Clara and Ezra, the 2 children, Dr. Hayes staying for supper. Their conversation flows easily, punctuated by laughter and the comfortable silences of people who understand each other's journeys. Outside, the first stars appear in the darkening sky, the same stars Clara watched on that desperate night in the mountains, searching for a pinprick of light in overwhelming darkness. She found it then, as countless others would find it through her example in years to come. Folks often ask me why I tell this particular story when I visit new settlements across the territory. Ain't it too harsh, they wonder, too painful to dredge up? I reckon they're missing the point. Life out here in the West can be mighty unforgiving. We've all seen good people broke by circumstance, decent souls twisted by greed, and innocent folks bearing burdens that would crush most spirits. Clara Brennan's journey from that auction block to the thriving McKinnon-Brennan ranch reminds us that such stories don't have to end in the darkness. When I think about what makes her tale worth telling, it ain't just about the injustice she faced. Lord knows, there's plenty of that to go around. It's about how ordinary people, a rancher with painful memories, a doctor carrying old regrets, a community that found its conscience, came together to set things right. We all stand on our own auction blocks at times, moments when the world tries to set our price based on our usefulness, our mistakes, or others' judgment. Clara's story reminds us that our true worth ain't determined by what others will pay, but by something much deeper, something that can't be bought or sold at any price. I'm grateful you've ridden along with Clara through her trials and triumphs. If you take just one thing from her journey, let it be this. No matter how dark the trail gets, there's always a pinprick of light somewhere. Sometimes you just need to keep your eyes open long enough to spot it. And if you happen to be that light for somebody else standing where Clara once stood, well, that's about the finest thing any of us can hope to be in this life.